if you don't want to be a lawyer, you don't have to be a lawyer just because you have a law degree. There are so many other paths you can take. And so I wanted to make sure I highlighted that in Andrew Learns About Lawyers. To just see yourself inside the interior pages of books shows kids and whoever's reading with them that we belong.
So, welcome to You Our Lawyer, Tiffany Obeng. How are you today?
I am great. Thanks for having me, Kyla.
Yes, thank you so much. Let's talk a little bit about your background and all of these books, right? Somebody reached out to me and was like, "You have to talk to Tiffany. She's a fantastic guest and she loves books." And I was like, "Wait a minute. I love books. Let's talk about it."
Right.
So, what are you doing right now and why do you have all those books behind you?
I don't know why that tickled me, but so I am a lawyer by trade. I graduated so long ago, and I practice in employment discrimination. So my area of focus is employment discrimination. However, before returning to practicing law, which we'll probably talk about the differences if we want to get into semantics, I was doing an alternative legal career or legal adjacent career, as I call it, where I was working as an equal opportunity specialist, consultant, investigator, what have you. So I was still dealing with employment discrimination laws, just not in the practicing aspect. Okay, so doing that for about 10 to 11 years before returning to practice. And during the pandemic, of course, we 2020, you start reevaluating your life, reevaluating your purpose, seeing what's going on. And I decided to go forward with publishing a children's book. So all throughout life, my mom has always said, "Oh, you're going to be an author." I thought I could be an author. I just never knew what I was going to author. My husband was always on my back about being an author. So in 2020, I said, okay, I've learned how to publish. So I published my first book, trying to do a legacy with my son and check off a bucket list item, not knowing that I was going to go 20 books later in 3 years. So, yeah. So, did the first book, did my little silent release, like, hey, family and friends, look what I did, and just was satisfied with that. But then I did my second book release and I did a little bit more hype. And then I started getting kind of inspired by other authors who were doing things and just by the statistics. And by that, I mean the lack of diversity in children's literature. So by this point, I'm seeing like a lot of statistics about how we're very underrepresented in children's literature. I hadn't really thought about it before. I'm looking at my son's bookshelf. All he has is about my two books that are diverse, if you will. And so I'm like, you know what, I can do something and I am going to do something. And so I just started publishing more and more books, trying to fill the gap in children's literature and trying to fill the gap in workplaces. So yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Okay, wait a minute. You just said so much. Okay, so full disclosure, I want to write a book. I'm
Yay.
terrified. I have, like, we did potty training with my daughter 2 years ago, and we're like, your body works. Look, you know what I mean? We're like, this is how it works. You've been going in a diaper, now you're going in the thing, you're making yellow. I grab the domain names, bodyworks book, you know what I mean? And I sit on it. I'm like, nope, just wait, right? What made you sit down and say, I'm doing it right now?
Because we had that extra time. So the pandemic, again, I'm working from home at this point. So we're all sent home trying to navigate remote work life. So now I don't have that commute. And again, just like having them in my ear. And I think I had stumbled across a Facebook groups where they were talking about independent publishing because I tried to follow one of my friends' footsteps and she had a small publishing company. And so I tried to reach out to them, but I don't know if they closed submissions or what, but I couldn't get through to them. And so I kind of just sat on it some more. But then I realized you can independently publish. And so I was like, oh, let me see what this is about. And so after doing my research, I was in there.
I love it. I love it. Okay, motivation from other people, the courage to do it yourself because it is courage to create something that hasn't existed before. Additional free time, and then you did the research.
Yes.
And you showed me a book. What was that book? Is that the very first one you published?
No, so this is one of my most recent publications. It came out in October, but it's a journal for Black women who want to write a children's book. So that's why I held it up.
What?
Yes.
Okay, purchase today. I'll email you a copy of my receipt. No, because I know I have to literally just say, Kyla, do it. Right? I know that I have to. I do book reviews every Monday on YouTube. I even review my daughter's books because when we got her prepared for potty training, we spent like 6 weeks reading books about how to go potty and oh, look, I did it to get her prepped. Also, I'm trying to raise a reader. So, like, we're all about reading. We're like, you reading 8 books tonight or 12 books? Like, we will spend an hour and read before bed. I do not care. So, I need this last little push, and I'm going to get that journal. I'm already a journaler. Say less. A journal about writing children's books.
Yeah.
This whole episode's for me. I don't even have to
It
do
was,
this.
it was just that simple. And the thing is, when I go out to vending events or events where I'm selling my books and things, a lot of times the people who would come up, of course, Black women would be like, oh, I wanted to write a children's book. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to create an affordable way for Black women to fulfill their dreams. A lot of people, I'm not going to say a lot of people, but some people are like, why it has to be Black women? And I'm like, you know what? Because I'm a Black woman, and because our voices are important, and because our voices need to be amplified, and because we're still lacking. And so that's why I made my journal specifically for Black women, not to say that no one else can write a children's book, but that's just what I wanted to do. So, anywho, but yeah, so it takes you through the whole writing process. It has motivational quotes throughout, affirmations throughout, and by the end, you should have a children's book that you're ready to publish, girlfriend.
Listen, you have literally taken every excuse, and eliminated it through journaling, and I'm so excited. I'm really excited. To make things worse, my mom is a book like marketer for independent publishers, and I talk to her about books all the time, and I'm still like, no, I'm not. No. But a journal, I can get behind, right? Because I'm sure the prompts, you have to be honest with yourself. Why haven't you started?
Well, I was going to say the first prompts are, why are you starting? Because the thing is, when you're on this journey of being an independent author, it has its ups and downs. And especially if you're going to be in the diverse kidlit space, you're going to have, I mean, we got book bans going on, right? So you're going to have pushback. You're going to have people wanting to say, well, why does Winnie have to be Black? And it's like, Winnie loves winter. And it's like, why isn't she Black? I've had people, you can't really see it because of the glare, but this is Andrew Learns About Lawyers. And so Andrew is the name of my son, and a lot of my books are inspired by him. I have 2 children now, but at the time I only had 1 when I started. And the Andrew series is inspired by him, and it's supposed to or intended to inspire and educate children about different careers and options in their future, right? So in Andrew Learns About Lawyers, he's obviously learning about lawyers, and he's the main character, of course, and his mom is telling him what a lawyer is and does and all those things. And so I've had people criticize calling it woke. And I was like, it's just a book about lawyers. And they're pretty much like, well, like, why would I have the mitigated gall to feature a Black boy and his mom telling him about lawyers and what he can be? So anywho, so just having your why understood is going to keep you moving forward. So I wanted to make sure I started off the journal with, why are you doing this? Who inspires you? And do you realize you can be an inspiration to other people?
Yes. I love that so much because, I have a book that we bought for my daughter, and I think it's like the ABCs of being a lawyer. So that's not very different than Andrew Learns About Lawyers, right? I'm sure you're going to be taking them through lessons of this is what you did. And in fact, you have the unmitigated gall to do it because you're advocating. Lawyers are advocating, right? And so I love that. You said I can advocate as a lawyer in the employment or equal opportunity space. I can advocate as well as a mother. So I love it.
And I love the intersection. So when I started and started getting on the role, it wasn't until I started doing like interviews and just talking to people about like what I do during the day and what I do during the night, if you will. And they were like, oh my gosh, the intersection of the two. And I'm like, oh yeah. So that kind of like rounded it out.
I was just saying it intersects because part of the reason this podcast exists is because you can never let go of your legal education. You can't let go of that training. It shows up everywhere, right? We're the people who are actually reading the terms and conditions of our iPhones. We're the people who are actually showing up at our mortgage like, okay, I read that. What about this part? You can't let it go. You literally can't. And so to bring that to the children's literature space, I love it. And then now you're advocating for Black women authors
Yes.
with even the journal, right? It
Yes.
shows up everywhere.
Yes, 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 yes. And I love it. Of course, it is hard. And of course, like I said, you get the backlash, but I try to focus on the compliments. It's so easy to focus on the negative and the criticisms and forget about the compliments. So like you being excited, like, oh my gosh, I can do it. Like that lights me up. So I try to focus on things like that. Or when I talk to people about my inspiration behind my books, such as the Seasons books, they're like, oh my gosh, I hadn't thought about we don't really have Black representation in Seasons books. And I always like to say that When He Loves Winter came because the snowy day was like 50 years ago, you know? So we just need more books. And it's not like a stand, if you will. Like it's just featuring them. That's it. Like they're doing normal things, normal everyday things. It's just a Black child character or a Black family. And so that's what was so important to me, to just feature them in normal everyday situations. So hopefully, not only can our people identify with these characters, but other people can see us as people.
It's true. Because I have a little girl, I have a 3-year-old, and she got the Afro unicorn pajamas.
Yes.
And we loved them. And I was like, it's not even so much that it's an Afro, because you're not trying to say the unicorn is Black, because unicorns don't exist. What you're saying is it's a unicorn with a different texture of hair. Because when we see people on TV, I'm like, look, she has curly hair, you have curly hair, I have curly hair. And it's not that it's woke, it's just that you are embracing all the different textures, lifestyles, all of the other things. It doesn't just have to be one way,
Yes.
right?
And I posted about this on my LinkedIn now that we're friends. But the seeing is believing aspect of things. So I remember talking to another podcaster about this. But when you see yourselves in media, be it TV, be it books, you realize that you're important and that you belong. And so to just see yourself grace the cost covers or inside the interior pages of books shows kids and whoever's reading with them that we belong not only in the pages of these books but in the world. Like we're beautiful and we are worthy. And so that's why it's so important to feature all types of people in books, in our media, or in media in general.
I love this. I love it so much. This is so good. So I'm so thrown off from everything we were supposed to talk about.
I get that a lot.
Because I'm really energized right now. But no, so let's talk about your legal adjacent career, okay? And you were working in the equal opportunity space and you write diverse books for children that are brown. It's so intertwined. It makes so much sense. Right now, you're creating equal opportunities in literature. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. Make sure you write the autobiography because someone's going to be like, look at how all these things like were set in place for this to happen. So, Tiffany,
Yes.
what made you decide to have a legal alternative job?
So I did not meet a real lawyer until I was in 11th grade. I say that all the time because I think that's very important as to why my career books are so important to me. Like that's my flagship product, as I say. So I didn't meet a real life lawyer until 11th grade. I didn't meet a Black female attorney until I was in law school. So I'm in law school at this point. So I don't really understand what lawyers do. And I'm learning about lawyers as I'm making my way through law school. Okay. So the only specialties I'm familiar with are the ones that's on TV, which is mostly criminal law. So I get into criminal law and I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. So as I'm fumbling my way through law school, trying to figure out like what is going to be my next step, I come across employment discrimination class and an employment law class, and I'm like, oh, now this I like this stuff. So I finally figure out like this is what I want to pursue. But in Texas, it's not that big. They say it's like bigger in California. But anywho, so at the time, of course, they're pushing big law, like you said. And I'm like, I don't know if I really want to go into big law, but of course, that's what they're pushing. So I must pursue it. I must pursue it. It didn't work out for me. Okay. So now what am I going to do? So I started working at a small solo practitioner law firm. And then after working there for a short period, I started working for this boutique consulting firm doing equal employment opportunity consulting. So that's how I got into the alternative legal adjacent careers. They hire lawyers to, do their consulting. And so I did that, rose in the ranks, and then I switched over to another entity, but doing the same thing. And then just recently, I went back into a law firm, one of the biggest law firms, big law now.
But
um,
I mean, now you've had so much project management under your belt from like publishing your books and doing all this stuff. I'm sure it makes sense. So, what I love about your story is the fact that you didn't decide I'm doing this and then you followed that through. I mean, you changed your mind and you gave yourself permission to change your mind, right? Because one of the things I've been finding in talking to almost 150 lawyers now is that we like a plan and we don't enjoy deviating from the plan. That's the easiest way to say it. I remember when, I had to change my mind about something and then I had to change my mind again. And I'm like, okay, am I done with the decisions? Can this just be it? And then the pandemic comes and then so you're just like, okay, so life is going to be consistently and constantly evolving. I didn't feel like that was happening before, right? You do undergrad and then you try to get into law school and then you're in law school and then you're this. It was always a path. And then now it's like, well, you're doing this. Do you enjoy this? Do you want to do something else? I had never considered that. Like, I even asked my mom, I was like, Mom, are you doing what you enjoy doing? Did anyone ever tell you that? And she's like, that was not a thing. You get a job, you stick with your pension. I didn't start to daydream until I was retired. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm both in a place of privilege and a pioneer in this space because I don't know what to do, right?
That was
so
good, girl.
Oh, thanks. It was hard, but I had to ask her. And because then I started the podcast while I was still in Big Law. And then I started making as much money as I was making there. And I'm like, can I leave to do this? I've never seen anyone doing this. But I'm like, if your bills are paid, why not? Right. And so it's hard to make decisions and to decide I'm going to do something different. So I commend you for making a different decision because most people do not enjoy statutory law, which is employment based law, where there is a huge code. Congress sends out new rules about what is and what's not right. So the fact that you enjoyed that, tell me a little bit more about this boutique firm.
So they respond to charges of investigation. So they have contracts with different companies and organizations and what have you. And whenever a complaint or charge or internal complaint of discrimination comes in, then it gets sent to them. Or I haven't worked there for over 6 years, so I'm just assuming this guy still goes, gets sent to them, and then the consultant does the investigation and prepares the response. And if there's any fact-finding conferences or anything like that, then they represent in that capacity. But they're outside. I don't even want to say counsel, but they're outside contractors or workers for the entity. And so then going to my next job, I did the same thing, but I was in-house. So I was internal. And now I'm back out practicing. So I do the same thing as I did before I left that boutique firm, but now I can counsel too because I'm practicing.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Well, it does make sense. And I appreciate the fact that you found an area that you love, but then you still challenge yourself by seeing it from a different side, being in-house, being external, and then now being with a big law firm because the aspects are going to all be different, right? Criminal law is very different than transactional law. But then within transactional law, for all my law students, that's working with paper, working with contracts, mergers and acquisitions, employment law, those kind of things. There are still so many unique areas within there, right? And so I think it's fascinating that you found a discipline that you enjoy and you were able to do it in different groups.
Yeah, I didn't even know that I would be doing this in so many different ways, that I would even end up back in big law. Because, like I told you, my track, they were saying, go to big law. That's the star. That's the star. And that didn't work out for me. So I was like, I guess I'll never be there. I guess, and then you have to deal with, I think you kind of touched on it, but you have to deal with like imposter syndrome, or did I fail being that I didn't get into big law? And that's what they say you have to do, even if you really don't know if you want to do it, but they keep saying you have to do it. So am I a failure now? So like dealing with that for so many years of, am I a failure? Did I succeed or whatever? And then having just become comfortable with your decisions. And I think nowadays, and that's one of the things, and I keep talking about Andrew learns about lawyers because I was so intentional on showing the different types of lawyers and including employment discrimination, but showing the different types of lawyers so you can know that there's more than just criminal law. Just hitting on it, of course, because it's for elementary children. And then also showing that there's different avenues you can take with your law degree. If you don't want to be a lawyer, you don't have to be a lawyer just because you have a law degree. There are so many other paths you can take. And so I wanted to make sure I highlighted that in Andrew Learns About Lawyers. And I also highlight the fact that we don't always go to court because that's what people think about lawyers. Like, you're always in court. No, we're not. We're really not in court like that. So just giving what I believe is a realistic perception of what lawyers do and the different types of areas you can consider practicing in. So, for instance, I have a little mention of animal rights law in there for the kids because they like pets. So, to kind of get them thinking like, oh, I like my pets, so therefore I can probably become an animal rights lawyer, things like that. And so I was very intentional in doing that in Andrew Learns About Lawyers because I didn't know. And so, like a lot of parents, you read with your child. So if you were ever reading Andrew Learns About Engineers or Scientists, you might be like, oh, I didn't know. Like I get people say, I didn't know that such and such existed. So I like that.
No, I love that because my husband is in software. And so when we read the books, even the one about like the ABCs for lawyers, we're learning new things. And his friends bought my daughter a whole bunch of books about coding. Baby loves to code and how to code for girls. And it was funny because we had a nanny once and she's like, okay, can we just read Brown Bear? And I was like, no, we're going to expose her to coding. 1, 2, 3 steps and repeat. Because why not? Is it hurting your feelings, right? Because to your point, as you're reading, you're learning something new too. And she's like, okay, but can we not do right? It's like G is for gravity. And this is a black hole. And she's like, can we not?
You have to, like, as much as Brown Bear is important, like, for reading or whatever, we have to also be intentional in balancing it with things that's going to keep them in the pipeline. So, with my career books or any of my 20 books, I'm hoping that I can inspire children to want to read. Our literacy rates suck. They are terrible. That's unfortunate. And so you have illiteracy amongst BIPOC children, but particularly Black children. Then you have dropout rates. And then you want to say, well, we have pathway programs that start in high school. But where are you pulling these kids from if they're not there to be pulled? So we have to start trying to spark their interest in education, try to find ways to keep them in school. And one of those ways is through books. And one of those types of books are career books or coding books or things that just can kind of expose them to this is what are some options for you. So if your daughter finds that she likes 1, 2, 3 repeat, then she may be more interested to take up math or science. I always joke kind of about when I was studying or researching Andrew Learns About Engineers and realized how much they do, like how important they are. I was like, what if somebody had told me about engineers? Would I have been more interested in math and science? And as I always say, I don't think the answer is yes, but at least I would have had that thought, that option to consider, like, I really want to be an engineer. So maybe I need to get tutorials or something like math tutorials or something. But I didn't know. I had no idea. So just being able to introduce these ideas and concepts to hopefully inspire the children to stay the course, to stay in the pipeline, to the talent pipeline, so we can start achieving these diverse and inclusive workforces where we belong. I mean, it's simple. It's a simple step.
It's simple, but it's so important. It's really influential. It's important, right? Because if they don't see it, how are they going to imitate it? I would not have imagined this would be my job, but I was also the kid in middle school, and they're like, Kyla's really sweet, but she just keeps talking. And I'm like, well, now I got a job where I just talk all day long. So it works out.
Yes.
Okay, so Tiffany, I have 2 more questions for you, then I'm gonna let you go.
Okay.
The first one is, okay, so you're already in the legal space and you decide to publish books, right? By all means, I'm sure people thought you were already successful. No. What were you saying to yourself about, well, I'm allowed to do something else, or I'm going to go out for this new challenge?
Thank you for reminding me because I was going to say that, but then I got on a soapbox. Piggybacking off of what you were saying about your mom, and it wasn't until after retirement that she realized she had other things she could have been doing. It wasn't until 2020 that I realized you can pursue two things. You don't have to just be one thing. And so now when I go speak to children, like for career day, of course, then I want to emphasize that you could be anything you want to be. And that can be multiple things. You don't have to just say, I want to be a lawyer. So therefore, I'm only a lawyer. You could be a podcast host. You could be an author. You can be so many things nowadays because we have the opportunity to be so many things. And so I think being able to have fulfilled two passions or goals of mine, like you said, successful, I do feel successful in that aspect, that I just had the ability or courage to start to try to pursue being an author, however that was going to look. I had no idea what it was going to look like. Now I feel more successful in being a lawyer, because I understand what success means for me in that space. And I feel successful being an author because, again, I understand what success looks like
Yeah,
in that space for me.
absolutely. I love that. I have a good friend, and she, we'll go out for lunch or something, and she's like, oh, Kyla, I'm just so successful. And I'm like, tell me about your success. She's like, well, we said we were going to meet up, and we met today. Look at all the success. I did some laundry this morning. Look at all the success. She's like, I ordered the groceries. Just success everywhere. And I'm like, yes. You could just lay on the couch some days and do nothing. And
It's hard out
so
here.
the fact that you got up and put it together, look, success. So, Tiffany, my very last question is, what would you say to young lawyers, 5 years practicing or less, or law students about what they could do with their law degree?
You can do so many things with your law degree. If you want to pursue big law, go ahead, have fun. But if you're like, I really don't know, but what else is there? There are so many options. There are so many alternative legal careers. And I call that, when I say alternative legal career, I'm saying a job where you can use your skills such as writing, research, speaking, those type of things. Those are like the major, in my mind, the major skills that we have as attorneys, where you could use them at another career field. So, like, compliance is a big field for us that I know a lot of lawyers go into. That could be institutional compliance. That can be something like EO compliance. It's just a compliance. So, if you don't want to practice per se, you don't want to be the person, like, you want. What I like about alternative legal careers is that they can afford you more of a work-life balance than what we're traditionally familiar with when it comes to being a lawyer. And so you can still use all those skills that you attained while in law school and still have an impact and still feel like you're being successful as a lawyer. It just looks different from what other people think it should look like. And by other people, I mean like people that's unfamiliar with the law field. Really.
Yes. And I mean, to your point from earlier, you hadn't met a lawyer until the 11th grade, and you hadn't met a Black female lawyer until you were in law school. So, how can you, to say I want to be a lawyer, but yet you don't actually see it?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much between there, right? There could be things that you were imagining you would do that were good and things you were imagining you would do that were bad. I was expecting to get yelled at in my big law office because that's what you see on TV. The partner is yelling at you. And so I'm like, okay, if you tell me to do it by Thursday, I'm going to do it by Tuesday so I never get yelled at. But then I'm like, okay, but I'm here and I don't really have a. Are they supposed to be yelling? Are they not supposed to be yelling? Oh, that's only TV, right? It's like, is it a rite of passage to get yelled at? What's happening? And so if you don't see it, you can't do it, right? I remember one of the first paralegals that I hired, it was a Black woman. And she was qualified, right? You go through all the resumes and she was qualified. And she was like, the only other Black woman here in the office is in hospitality, the lady who fills, the sodas and the waters for meetings. And I was like, oh, what other barriers can we break down next week, right? Because I was like, well, I hadn't even considered it. And I was like, okay, well, what else can we do? What else can we do? You have to be able to see it. And I think the fact that you worked in employment and equal opportunities, and then you're advocating by being a children's book author and spotlighting Black and BIPOC children, right? Because we get lumped in with BIPOC, but Black, capital B, Black is its own genre. Let us have it. So I really appreciate this. And I think, I hope when you listen back to it, you'll be like, wow, there really was like a thread through my whole career, my decisions leading me to advocating.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you may not know it right off the bat because, again, it took me. about to be 40 years old. It took me to dang near 40 at this big age to realize my potential, if you will. And I like to rely on a quote by Marianne Williamson. Our greatest fear is not that we're inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. I remember when I first heard it on Coach Carter, I didn't understand what they were talking about. But as I embarked on this journey, I was like, that is our greatest fear. Like to, and I always get like really passionate about this part, to 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 think that your little pebble that you toss into the ocean can have such significant ripple effects, that you are making such a difference, that you have the power to change something. That is terrifying. That is very terrifying. And so I like to live by that quote, and I like to just do it. And we say it a lot in the author community that I'm in, do it scared. Like, I'm not saying I'm not scared. Every time I release a book, I'm scared, but scared about the reception, scared about, and not reception as in people are not going to buy it, because I mean, it's whatever, but reception as far as the negative criticisms that can come from it. I'm like, it's books, people. Like, if you don't like it, just move forward. But
it's books, but like, we're artists and you're sensitive about your artwork.
Right. So. That's exactly right. But I like to say, when I speak to people about the importance of reading, that, and I know we're wrapping up, sorry, that if reading wasn't important, then we would not have the bans on books. If reading wasn't important, then we would not have been beaten and killed for reading back when we were enslaved. If reading wasn't important, there would not be an attack on reading. Like, what is it between these pages? They know how powerful reading is. And so we just need to realize the power that is held within the pages. We have to, they're attacking it. They've been attacking it since the beginning. And it's because they're so powerful. It's so powerful and it's so transformational. So anyway.
No, it is. I was just telling my daughter, you know, we're looking at the ABCs and I'm like, these 26 letters have filled your bookshelf with books. Like, that is mind blowing. It is literally mind blowing if you think about it. What can happen with it's fantastic. I mean, I love spoken word, like podcasts and music and all of it. I love written words. I love writing. I love all of the stuff. Which is how I'm using my legal degree as a media host. Because you can never let go of the research, the writing, the analytical skills, all.
That's right. And that's why when people say, well, how are you able to crank out 20 books in 3 years? And a good number of them, which I could not have ever perceived, have been recognized. Like Andrew Learns About Lawyers, Topps list has been recognized as a best elementary age book for engineers or about engineers. I probably messed it all up, but the point is it was recognized. Spencer Knows Spring was on Yahoo best product list. Scout's Honor, which is not sitting up there, was on a list by Book Riot about the best books for honesty. Like, are you serious? Are you serious? So being able to research and present information in a succinct manner in a way that people can understand is a positive skill of mine that I've been able to use when writing these books.
I love it. I'm so inspired and fired up, and I know the audience is going to absolutely love it. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for sharing your time with me, and I cannot wait to go buy my journal and buy one for a friend and get this episode out.
Thank you.
Yeah, you have a great day.